Okay, thank you, Steven, Björn, and Per, for your presentation and also respecting, I would say, the available time. Alexander, can you show the questions which were submitted? Yeah, you see them on the bottom on the right. And now, a question for Steven. So are the E and ISO standards for thermal bridges somehow included in building regulations in Sweden and or elsewhere? Steven, there's a question for you.
As far as I know, the ISO standards are not included in building regulations for thermal bridges. It's quite vague, actually. They just say that you should calculate the thermal bridges or use a 15%. I don't know if it gives the actual number, but it uses a certain percentage value to sort of take into account that. Björn might know more about that. I think he's a bit more specialized on standards than I am.
Okay. Björn or Per, you have anything to add to this feedback?
Well, Per here, there is the equation which was shown previously with the sum U and A and the psi times L and MC is included in the Swedish building code. So it says that they should be calculated, the thermal bridges should be accounted for. Although maybe there is a standard, I'm not sure if there is a mention any number of standards.
Okay.
Björn here. The Swedish building code refers to standards, so they do. However, you could say they might do it. I don't know if the correct English term is indirect. They don't refer to the actual standards directly. They refer to the overall standards, which Steven showed in the beginning, how to calculate the energy demand for the building. And the standard for the energy demand, of course, refers to the standard for how to calculate thermal bridges. However, it's not like in force that you must, of course, use the standards which a standard referred to. If it's okay, I can also then go through with the second question then, because that was directed to me.
Yes.
No, and that's of course the problem, that they do not clearly determine, and also the standards do not clearly determine how a building closing area should be defined. However, you could of course interpret if you say something like the area and so on, internal area and so on, but they do not actually define it. That's why we have differences, and the standards also allow for differences. So it's not clearly defined.
I think that there the European standard indeed does not specify internal or external boundaries, because there is no consensus among the member states. Some countries use external dimensions, some other countries internal dimensions. So therefore, at the European level, it was not possible to come with a unique rule. My interpretation is that most member states define whether it's internal or external. But that's indeed a major reason, it can be a major reason for these wide variations. Perhaps a question linked to that, is there in Sweden a check on these, in the context of the EPBD, is there a check on the correctness of how thermal bridges are handled?
Well, if I can start answering the way I see it as a contractor, we of course, to be able to get a building permit, have to show some sort of calculation that verifies that we expect to meet the building regulations. However, today, unfortunately, the state of how it's checked is, do we hand over a calculation? And then there's nothing more. So if you just hand over a calculation, they don't have the time, the resources, or the knowledge to check. Some municipalities do. So I'm not going to say that everybody doesn't do it, but in general, we have also sometimes by mistake, actually, from my company, handed over energy calculations which show that we don't fulfill the building regulations. However, we still get the building permit. Yeah. So they see, do you have a calculation? Yes. Okay, you get the building permit.
Yeah. And I think, is it correct that a specific feature of the Swedish EPB regulation is that so in order to get an EPC, you must have measured consumption, and it is the measured consumption data which is used for checking the correctness of the EPC. Is that the case in Sweden?
It's complicated because if somebody wants to sell a building, if somebody wants to start to rent out parts of the building for living or for a company, for consultants, offices and so on, they need to have this energy certificate or EPC, Energy Performance Declaration, EPD, I mean, sorry. And since we want to do it quite directly, we don't want to wait to measure for 1 year. Usually these energy performance declarations are made based on the calculations. However, we always, at least from where I work, recommend them to update this declaration as soon as possible. But to be able to follow the law and start renting out space in a building, we need to have this declaration. And we don't want to wait for a whole year without any people in the building, and then we don't have a correct measuring anyhow. So
okay.
It's kind of common to do it based on the calculated values. However, we do a lot of following up anyhow, and a lot of clients expect it from us.
Okay, and do you have any information about checks by the government resulting in non-accepting the EPC? So are there controls if, for example, some bridges or other things are not correctly assessed?
It's more NGOs, non-governmental organizations, according to me, like Sveby, like something called Lågan Bygg, and so on, which checks. That's my experience, and also that's our clients, the people who buy buildings from us, complain.
Okay, another question.
I can add in, it's actually a problem in Sweden that nobody follows it up because the communes say that it's Boverk's job to follow it up, which is the building organization in Sweden. And then the building organization, I think they say it's up to the communes to follow it up. And it gets caught in between the bureaucracy that in the end, it's a bunch of calculations that are the basis for most of the certificates and not actual measured values. I had a student do a thesis on this a couple of weeks ago. There was exam A. So it's little new information, I guess.
Okay. Then there was a question to Stephen or Björn. So how large are thermal bridges, I assume in the Swedish context, in percentage of the transmission losses and energy use on average in different buildings? I think you show already partly it, but can you say something more about it?
Yeah, I can say a number and then see if Björn agrees with it. But I think, of course, it depends on the building and what the energy use is of the building. Like Björn showed, a passive house, we can see thermal transmission losses between 30 to 60% of the total. And that translates to an energy loss of maybe between 5 and 10%. So maybe the energy losses, it only becomes critical when the building is on the border of your goal, so to speak. If it's close to the requirement. What's that?
Is it possible that I just quickly show my screen once more?
Alexander, can you do that?
Yeah, give me a moment. Sorry, that was Björn?
Yeah, that was Björn. Thank you. I think this is quite important because people are looking for these percentages and so on. This is from another paper published in Energy and Buildings, 2013. And I think this is maybe the most interesting information based on the question, how big are the thermal bridges and so on. We have here quantified in different building stock. Old building stock, you have to read the paper to understand what's the definition of old building stock. New construction, how we build today, and best practice, kind of passive houses and so on. And then we have different measuring methods, internal, overall internal, and external measuring. And then we have different exterior wall construction, concrete walls with the external insulation, precast concrete side walls, and light infill walls. And as you can see, if you use external measuring, sometimes it can be very low. But if you use internal measuring and have a lot of insulation, it can be very high. So this is, I think, it's very important. We should not use percentages when we discuss thermal bridges. There are no correct percentage value due to the increase about thermal bridges.
Okay. Björn, is it possible that you integrate this table also in your PowerPoint presentation so that we can also, or let's say, probably not use, but I think it's an interesting table. We can see afterwards if we can make it available. Okay, I propose to close.
Add it.
Yeah, I propose that we close here the Q&A and move then to the presentation by Arnold Janssens, where he presents the approaches of taking thermal bridges into account in the Flemish EPBD regulations.